Today's guest is Santos Jaguar. Based out of Salt Lake City, Utah, Santos has been making the moves with his music to be known as an artist to watch. Welcome, Santos.
Hey,
Hey,
man.
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of
What
course.
up?
Happy to have you here. All right, so let's start at the beginning. Where were you born and raised, and how did music first come into your life?
I was born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah, Midvale, Sandy area to be more exact. And music came into my life really early on. I would say probably at like the age of 6 or 7, just listening to my parents' music and having my stereo in my room, just blasting Mexican music.
Nice.
And that was like the early days. And then later on, my older brother got me into hip hop when I was like 12 or 13.
Awesome. What were some of the artists you remember listening to growing up?
Yeah, so funny enough, I was just talking to someone else about this, but I remember early on, I was listening to artists like 50 Cent, Nelly, Green Day, a little bit of Radio Disney,
Nice.
Hillary Duff or whoever was popping back then.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man, all that good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Did your family make music or play music themselves, or were they just listeners?
My family was just mostly listeners. Yeah, I had some I had probably like a faraway uncle in Mexico that made music and was like a part of a band, but I didn't even know about that until I was older.
Gotcha. That's cool, man. When did you start getting into deciding you want to make your own music and write music?
When I officially decided and made the move, it was about 2008. I was about 14 years old. I was in ninth grade. An opportunity popped up to use a studio at the Boys and Girls Club of Midvale. And that's when I started my whole journey. As soon as I heard myself on that microphone, I just was obsessed, like to hear myself back. Like maybe it sounds a little, I don't know. I was just hyped over hearing my voice and how it sounded on the Baby Blue mic from, the Baby Blue mic. That was the first ever mic we used. Yeah, it was amazing.
That's so cool. What were you performing at that time?
At that time, I was doing more of like kind of like an old school hip hop, kind of boom bap, 90s style kind of hip hop. That's kind of the approach I was taking back then when I first started off, more of a rapper.
Gotcha. Did you continue to write music that whole time, like ever since then, or did you kind of take a break and then come back at some point?
For the most part, it was continuous. It wasn't until probably I graduated high school when I no longer could use a studio at the Boys and Girls Club after graduation. I did have like a 1 year, 2 year break in my first year of college. I was still making like a song here and there, but it wasn't as consistent as before. And then, after a couple years went by, I was just like, nah, I gotta like be more consistent and get back in there. But yeah, I did kind of take a little break there. College got way too consuming and stressful and yeah, so.
Nice. What was it like being without music? Like, was there a difference between the time of your life when you had it and you're writing and you didn't have it? Like, was there a way you felt different?
Oh yeah, man, most definitely. Like I was super stressed out, one because of college, but I just felt like, I don't know, man, something about not being able to create and be creative. Just, I felt drained. I felt like it wasn't me, I felt empty. And I just being able to express myself, so yeah, it was very hard. I started having a moment of like, okay, I need to refocus myself and I need to find a way to find a studio or something. But yeah, it definitely was tough when I wasn't creating music.
Yeah. So when you decided to go back into it, what were the first steps you took to make it happen again? Like you mentioned, you need to find a studio. Was that one of the first things you did or what?
Yeah. One of the first things I did was looking for studios. I did have a few buddies that had like their own little home studios, so that helped. It was kind of like starting all over again because I had all the resources at the Boys and Girls Club as far as beats and recording and everything. So it was having to find producers, studio, a budget for studio time. But yeah, more than anything. And then just having that creative mindset, getting into a creative space, because, you know, we were in the studio every day, from going to that to like a normal life and trying to write a song while at, you know, like while at work, and just trying to shift my mentality more than anything, to get in that creative mindset.
Yeah, for sure. So has music always been a collaborative effort since then for you? Like, have you always worked with people, or do you ever do stuff by your own, or how does that work for you?
Yeah. Since the beginning, since day one, it's always been a collaborative effort. I've always worked with different producers, people, you know, different engineers, you know, different singers. So yeah, it's always been a group project, which I've always enjoyed, which can have its ups and downs, right? It can get a little tricky when you get too many people involved, or sometimes it can be just perfect. So
For sure.
yeah, it's been a challenge working with different people.
Yeah. What was it like trying to build those connections? And like, how did you start? Like, at first, did you just go with your friends to work with, or how did you slowly build that network?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that really helped to grow the network was doing shows and just meeting other artists. And yes, I would go first with like my friends that were also musicians, but I think the biggest thing was just going out to the community and just being active, you know, networking with people. And whether it was a musician or whether it was just a community event, like I remember there was these friends, they were poets, and they did kind of like a poetry slam at a Mexican seafood restaurant in Kearns randomly. And, you know, they invited me and we performed, you know, and it was cool because we were in front of all these college students or whatever. And that was kind of my little community at that time. So I was really just reaching out to my community at that moment. So yeah.
That's awesome. So you started playing live. Have you always been playing live ever since day one of coming back, I guess? Or how has that been?
Yeah, so ever since I started, since I was 15 years old, I've always performed live. Just recently, probably like a couple months ago, I barely started implementing a live band. And probably a year ago, maybe 2 years, I implemented having backup dancers with me to let them do the dancing instead of me trying to do it. So yeah, but from the beginning, it was always just me. And sometimes I would have a hype man or whoever I was performing the music with since day one, been performing like since 15 years old, hitting the stage, messing up, you know, getting booed, getting, you know, made fun of, whatever, you know, but I was just so about it. I didn't care about any of that stuff.
What was a big lesson you had to learn about playing live and able to get better? Like, what's some big improvements you had to make personally besides, you know, the setup around you?
I would say just remembering my, you know, my lyrics, and not just remembering the lyrics, but also, you know, having the, how would you say it, inflection, you know, having that projection, I should say. Being able to really project on the microphone, I think, has been the biggest thing for me, because I don't know, I mean, for the most part, I would say I kind of have a soft voice, so like it was always a challenge to like learn how to like properly project myself on the microphone, and even holding the microphone the right way, holding the mic. So it's been a process. It's kind of funny because people don't think about those things, but it's, you know, those are real things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, of course, adding a band and stuff is stuff people can't see and can't think about. But as artists, I feel like sometimes you're sitting there and you have to think about little things you work on every single show, and it just adds up. So that's cool. You notice those things. That's awesome.
Yeah, and you gotta learn the hard way, right? You gotta learn the hard way, because, like, you know, there's certain situations where I've messed up really bad. Like, first time ever going out to California, San Jose, California, and doing a show out there, and like, I have family out there, and they were all inviting me to drinks and stuff before the show, and that just wasn't a good idea. I mean, I didn't like fall on my face or nothing, but I just wasn't fully focused. You know, I was just kind of spaced out or whatever. So things like that to go a long way, you know. And there are some artists out there that do get intoxicated before, and I wouldn't say they're fine on stage, but
Yeah.
there's some people that do it, and I just can't do
Yeah.
it. So I learned the hard way.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's like every artist is kind of different. It feels like playing live. Like they all have to learn different things that work for them. And I feel like it's just one of those things you have to play live to be able to figure it out. I mean, some artists, you know, they don't want to play the small shows a ton before they get the big shows, but there's really so many kinks I feel like you have to work out before you get those big shows can pull it off, you know?
100%, 100%.
So have you done touring before? So you mentioned playing in California.
I've done a little bit of touring in California, but it's just barely starting off. Just right now, actually, going back to California and then something in Florida.
Nice.
But yeah, we're barely getting into those waters, just barely. So I'm ready to enter and to learn. So yeah,
that's gonna be great, man. I'm stoked for you.
Thank you.
So what are your goals for live music going forward? Like, do you want to do more tours? Do you want to play more around, you know, the community in your area? What do you want to do?
Yeah, I definitely want to go on more tours. Right now, we're already launching merch, my first merch, which is the hat that I'm wearing right now. We're starting off with hats, and then, you know, we eventually want to build up to more merchandise and just become more business savvy, you know, with the whole music. Because for the longest time, out of those 10 years, I would say that, you know, maybe the last 3-4 like was when I started taking it more business, and yeah, just becoming, you know, taking it more of a business approach, and just being able to, my biggest goal is to be able to live off music, you know, 100%. And I do look like I do want to have other entrepreneur things out there that I want to get into, but I want to be able to just live off my music, either whether that's wholly independent or an independent label or distribution. But I do look, you know, I am looking towards, you know, teaming up when the time is right with like a distribution deal or a marketing company or whatever the case may be. But I definitely want to take it to the next level, you know, to the professional level.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm curious, what's the Latin music, I guess, scene like in your area? I mean, because I know there's a lot of like English speaking music and stuff like that. What's the reception been for you? Like, how's it fitting in that?
So it's definitely growing in Salt Lake City, with Latinos, Spanish speakers being the second biggest, you know, population in Utah.
Yeah.
It's definitely gotten better, but it's nothing compared to, like, you know, like a California or a Florida.
Sure.
It's been great though. You know, I'm forever grateful because I became a big fish in a small pond really quickly. And there are a lot of great Latin artists out there, but just because the city is growing right now, there's a limited amount of opportunities as far as, you know, nightclubs and performances and DJs that are out here. It's kind of all the same. It's very, very small. And it's nothing like these big cities where it's like too many things going on, where, you know, there's just endless opportunities. Here it's just tiny, but it's growing, you know, and I've been received very well, and I'm thankful because I've been able to, I mean, I'll just say it, like, being able to kind of like be the leader in it and take over.
Yeah.
Maybe some people might not feel that way, but I do. So
That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, at least what people have told me, you know, and I try to just keep my head straight on and just stay humble. You know, I try not to get too caught up in any of that stuff.
Yeah. So are you glad you started in Salt Lake, like compared to somewhere like California? Do you think that worked to your benefit, or do you think it'd be better over there?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Most definitely. 100%. Honestly, when I was younger, you know, we have this whole perception of you have to go to LA to make it type thing.
Yeah.
But now that I'm older, I'm just like, I wouldn't have had it any other way. Like, I love Salt Lake City. You know, I've had DJs in LA be like, bro, you just need to like take over Utah. They're like, you just need to take over Utah and just like do your thing over there, because obviously, you know, in places like LA, for example, it's very saturated and you know, and who knows, but yeah, super thankful Salt Lake City, you know, Utah. So it has its positives and its negatives, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's cool. I mean, yeah, it's like me personally, I haven't seen a ton of Spanish music around here locally. So that's cool. You can be like what I just said, one of the leaders. I think that's a huge benefit for you, especially like you said, big fish in a small pond. So I think it's gonna be great.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's the thing, man, is that I think the issue what happens is that um a lot of the other artists that are great, man, better than me. I would never say I'm the best artist out there, but there's so many artists out there that are great, great music. But I think what happens is they just stay in that one community versus going everywhere else. And that's what I love to do. I love to just go anywhere and everywhere outside of that community, right? Obviously, I do stuff there, but I also do everything outside of it.
Gotcha. That's awesome, man. How has it been getting live shows set up as a Latin artist? Can you find more people to play with you? Like, is it hard booking shows on the venue side? Like, what's your experience been trying to get that set up?
Um, for the most part, it's been pretty well. It's been a process. I do have a little bit of experience on kind of throwing my own shows, and it hasn't been anything too crazy as far as like big venues. Um, but as far as what I've done already is usually I connect with DJs that already have a good connection with these venues or already have something going, and then they just kind of add me into the mix. So that's helped a lot. That's helped a lot as far as out of state and in state too. That's like, shout out to all the DJs out there.
Yeah,
They're the,
absolutely.
they're the
Yeah.
ones really making it happen.
Yeah. And it's interesting. We talk to artists, and like some people, when they start out as a band, think the first thing I need is like followers on Instagram. But we've come to find through some of these interviews that the first thing you need is networking. You need connections. You need to know other artists, other DJs, other people in the industry, because
Yep.
like the DJs are helping you out. They're going to be the ones getting you the shows.
Exactly. And that's what they're doing, right? The DJs are doing the networking, right? They're the ones kind of working with everybody. So yes, networking is key, 100%.
Yeah. So you mentioned you've started to be more business minded with your music for the past few years. What's a big piece of business advice you'd give to an artist who's just starting out, who just wants to be where you were at like 5 years ago?
Oh man, that's a good question. I feel like I'm still figuring things out, but I don't know, man. It's I would say potentially, and this is something that I'm still working on, and I don't know. I know there's always levels to this, but I would say, potentially setting up some sort of LLC for your brand. That's something that I'm still actually in the process of, and I know that doesn't always guarantee, success having an official business, but maybe just doing that, right? Taking that approach of setting that up and being able to have the resources that way, because that's something that I've just barely learned. And that's just through other friends that already have their own businesses that have nothing to do with music, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that, and just, I think every situation is different, but potentially implementing some sort of written agreement, and just communicating really, things are always going to happen, there's things that might not always fall through, but I would say having some sort of agreement or paperwork potentially. But I know every case is different, right? I know.
Yeah, for sure.
It always depends. Like I personally still have a hard time, doing that and executing that. So.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, I love that. I mean, especially like starting a brand. I feel like a brand is something that gets overlooked too often starting out, but you realize it later. I feel like, artists can really benefit from having it, like you're saying, with the merch.
Yes, exactly. A brand. That's the key. Yep, that's the word.
Awesome. So tell me about the experience so lately you said you got a live band for the first time in a while. Mm-hmm. Tell me what it's been like going from just having your own shows to now including a band.
So we're so new. I mean, we only have, what is it? I think one live show under our belt. And it's been a challenge, adjusting to, first just converting the sound over to a live band. And not just that, but things that might happen, technical difficulties, volume, there's all these little things that that go in place, and that was kind of the intention of when we did that first show out in Soundwell, was just kind of like, hey guys, like, we might not be ready all the way, but let's just throw ourselves into the fire and see what happens. And it was a complete fail. There was a major fail that happened at that show, but I just learned a lot from it. We were still playing with like a backtrack and then the live music, and we kind of fell off beat for a little bit, and it kind of affected the performance. But you know what I'm saying? You just got to know how to improvise. So yeah, and that's something, again, fairly new, and it's something that will only be used for the right occasions. I'm not going to be using bands every time, but yeah, for sure.
Interesting. So are you going to stick with using backing tracks along with the live band, or have you kind of adjusted since that show?
So the goal is to eventually be able to merge the live backtrack with the DJ and the live band, but take out some elements of the song. So then they're playing like the actual beat live.
Yeah.
And so eventually, I don't know, I've been a big fan of how, like, I know like hip hop shows, for example, like I think I've seen like Lil Wayne at these big arena shows have like a live drummer, but he still has the backup track. So that's kind of the goal, to like be able to mix both elements, where it gives it that energy, but it also still has those, like, I guess you can say, electronic elements of the song that are all digital or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's all just one step at a time. And I think it's great you had that show to kind of like step into the lake a little bit and see how it goes, and like what you need to figure out and what you can do moving forward,
Yeah, exactly. So it was interesting.
That's awesome. So what are you excited for that's coming up?
I think the biggest thing that I'm excited for is just going back to these shows. I got these upcoming shows, like I mentioned earlier, the one in Salt Lake, May 21st, and then the out-of-state shows. I'm just excited to go back out on the road and just to network and to start, just learning some more. And also the merch. The merch is another thing I'm very, very excited for. Like, we just barely started taking pre-orders for the hats, and it's been a process, man. It's been a big process. And so I think a lot of people get discouraged in doing things because they feel like they need to do all these steps before, when realistically you just need to start with like step one, so.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any singles coming up or any more recording?
Yeah. So I recently just dropped the song, Las Vibras, last month, but I also do have a new song coming out for next month, actually April 20th. I'm going to be dropping another new song called Sandia Watermelon, and so that one's going to be really cool. It's going to be a fusion of like kind of a Mexican regional music with a combination of more of a Latin urban reggaeton, kind of pop sound. And so yeah, and we're using a lot of live guitars in there, and we collaborated with a local upcoming group of 3 brothers actually that play they play Mexican regional music, and so we collaborated and they put some live guitars on there, and so it's gonna be something completely.
That sounds awesome.
Experimental, yeah. So it's been taking a while in behind the scenes, like mixing and mastering. It's been a challenge for sure for my engineers. So it's been funny, kind of going back and forth on the edits. But that's so cool.
I'm excited for you.
Thank you, man.
Do you see yourself continuing to just release singles, or do you eventually want to release like an EP or an LP?
Yeah, I do definitely want to eventually get to an LP or an EP or even an album. I've had a lot of people actually recently tell me like, you should make an album. Yeah. And I think just right now, with just so much things going on in people's lives and people consuming so much music, and especially with me still working myself up there, I want to make it easier for people to consume it. So that's why I've been doing singles. But, I think I'm just going to keep building up the catalog for a good while. And then I feel like when we start building that fan base a little bit more, then we're going to definitely give them a full length project and, you know, a whole concept and everything.
That would be so cool. Do you feel like your music is evolving? So you mentioned you're learning a lot with business, you're learning a lot with live. Do you feel like you're learning more with recording, and like, is your sound evolving with that to the point where it's almost good to do singles right now to kind of just figure out what your sound is? Or are you comfortable with what your sound has become to the point where you could say, if I had what I needed, I'd make an LP right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I'm kind of in the middle. I feel like I'm coming really close to what my sound is. I definitely feel way more comfortable. But I feel like I still am open to suggestions and experimenting for sure. But yeah, that's really what it's been right now, is because of the singles, I've been able to experiment a little bit more. And the numbers have kind of showed me what people like to hear from me. But I also saw that, like, just because I do a specific kind of style or genre, that's not always going to guarantee, you know, the same outcome as it did at first. So that's why I was like, okay, I got to be able to evolve and grow. And something that I've been really doing lately has been just more focusing on having like a more melodic sound, you know, getting into a little bit more kind of a singy kind of rap style versus just straight kind of rapping. And that's something that I've been more comfortable with and embracing more, you know, because I used to, when I was doing straight hip hop, I used to, because of the culture and stuff, you know, people, it wasn't until Drake came out, right, that if you sang and you rapped, it was like, oh, you're too feminine or whatever. So now I'm like, all right, like, I don't care. Like, I'm a big fan of like a Sway Lee that just hits you with these melodies and is super like melodic and just amazing. So that's something that I'm personally really embracing and just like doing my own style of it, really. So
yeah, that's awesome. And it sounds like you're making a lot of progress, but in just so many different ways with your music career right now. So that's awesome to hear about.
thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Well, it's been good to talk to you today, man.
Likewise.
Yeah, thanks. Where can our listeners find you on social media?
Yeah, so they can find me everywhere. Santos Jaguar WW. Every social media is underneath that name. I just recently rebranded everything. And then, you know, on Spotify and everything else, you know, Santos Jaguar, Santos Jaguar. You can find everything online.